Okay, it's about starting time. Well, I'm Jeep, I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Jeep.
Hi, everybody. I'm also a drug addict. And I'm glad to be here. And I'm glad to be here sober, and I'm glad you're all here. I heard several people tonight mention that they're here for a seminar. I think, in all honesty, this is much closer to a retreat than a seminar, because I don't really know enough to do a seminar. So please enter into the weekend in that spirit that we're all going to be working together and exploring being sober as members of 12-step groups and doing it with the influence of Buddhist teachings. And so what I remember last year I mentioned that what we're doing is the 12 steps from a Buddhist perspective rather than Buddhism from a 12-step perspective. And I mentioned that for a couple of reasons. One is because although I've read a lot about Buddhism and I've studied it and I've been to a lot of retreats, I'm by no means an expert. And I am pretty good at staying sober. I've been sober for a while and I really enjoy my life. So I've got some good points going in that direction. But I do know right now, sitting here, that there are several people in this room that know more about Buddhism and the teachings than I do. And so once again, I'm going to be speaking in that spirit, or realizing that I'm pretty much a rookie. And so that's okay. I've got another 500 or so lives to go before I really have to get it all figured out. I do have the sense there are a lot of people in the world that don't hold 12-step programs in the regard that I do, and also get hung up on the God stuff quite a bit. And I'm thinking that it might be beneficial to have a recording of talking about the 12 steps from a Buddhist perspective. I'm going to start out tonight, bless you, talking about the 6th and 7th step. Prior to coming here, I spent a fair amount of time thinking about the 12 steps, how that fits in with various aspects of Buddhist teachings, and also the question of, why would people come here? What is this about? And for me, what it's about is that, contrary to the way I thought about it prior to getting sober in AA, I thought that the problem that I had was that I drank too much. It was clear that when I drank, bad stuff happened. I cracked up cars, I didn't make it to work, people were mad at me, I woke up with unexplained injuries. And I also was able to not drink for a bit, for at least a couple of years without AA. But as it turns out, I didn't have any inner peace at all during that time. I was able to make a fair amount of money and be pretty successful in business. Workaholism is an excellent substitute for alcoholism. I also substituted a number of other drugs, some prescribed and taken sort of the way they were prescribed, some that I failed to mention to my psychiatrist. And I didn't really connect it with my alcoholism because I hadn't gotten in trouble for the drugs. And so I ended up drinking again. I ended up a maintenance drinker. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that tomorrow. But the bad news was I ended up a maintenance drinker. The good news was I ended up in rehab and I ended up in recovery. And quite honestly, I showed up in a rehab 7 years after I started trying to quit drinking. So it's not like totally spontaneous. But I ended up in a rehab and I started getting better like from the time I walked in the door. Something changed for me. And it was profound. The nurse in the nursing station said, "I think you're cross-addicted." I didn't know, I'd never heard the term. And, it instantly, it was like, oh my God, drugs are a problem for me too. It's a little embarrassing that I didn't realize it at the time. So I started getting better, and I did the things they told me to do in the rehab. They said, go to 90 meetings in 90 days. I didn't quite make all 90 in 90, but I gave it my best shot. And they said, get a sponsor. I got a sponsor right off the bat. I didn't get a home group for a while. But on the whole, I was really trying to do this thing. And I was reading the literature, the big book in the 12 and 12, and I started reading the historic literature, probably just because I like history. But it was all very helpful, and I really started getting better. And I was able to see fairly early on that this recovery thing wasn't just about quitting drinking. I mean, fairly early on, this is again 7 years after I really started getting serious that my drinking was a problem. And it led me to do the fourth and fifth step, I think, or the first two I think of as being major work type steps. And that left me needing to do a sixth and seventh step. I had a sponsor help me with the fourth and fifth step. And we got down on our knees and we did a third step prayer. Then I went through my fourth step with him, and he had some pretty good advice for me when we did our fifth step together. And then, like most of us probably, at least the ones that have sponsors like mine, he said, you know, just like the big book says, you know, go back to your room, review the fifth step that you've done, take an hour, see if it was thorough, see if you've left anything out, and you know, if that's feeling right, do the seventh step, which basically amounted to saying the seventh step prayer. And then boom, the sixth and seventh step were done as far as the big book was concerned. And you know, I was feeling pretty good about myself, and I can't say that it was problematic or bad, but over the years I've had a tendency to go to big book meetings and go to 12 and 12 meetings, and every so often we would cycle around to the sixth and seventh step in the 12 and 12. And lo and behold, whereas in the big book the sixth and seventh step basically get about a paragraph each, about 2 paragraphs each. And by the time Bill wrote the 12 and 12, they had each grown into an entire chapter. And they had shifted from something you could do in a matter of an hour, the 2 of them, to being described as being lifelong steps. I'll try not to take too long to find stuff, but so step 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character, is AA's way of stating the best possible attitude one can take in order to make a beginning on this lifelong job. And that was quite a difference from something you can do in really a matter of minutes. And then it went on to the 7th step, and starts with talking about humility. And it says, it's right at the beginning of the 7th step. Since this step so specifically concerns itself with humility, we should pause here to consider what humility is. And then it goes on. Indeed, the attainment of greater humility is the foundation principle of each of AA's 12 steps. For without some degree of humility, no alcoholic can stay sober at all. That is pretty profound, and it's certainly in very short, very short sentence. Humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. It references humbly. That really, when I did it the first time, it really didn't have the impact on me. My focus was on this God thing that I wasn't all that clear on, rather than on the humbly part. And it really took quite a while for me to start appreciating what that was talking about. And then it goes on. True, most of us thought good character was desirable, but obviously good character was something one needed to get on with the business of being self-satisfied. With a proper display of honesty and morality, we'd stand a better chance of getting what we wanted. But whenever we had to choose between character and comfort, the character building was lost in the dust of our chase after what we thought was happiness. Seldom did we look at character building as something desirable in itself, something we would like to strive for, whether our instinctual needs were met or not. We never thought of making honesty, tolerance, and true love of man and God the daily basis of living. I got to tell you, the first time I did a 7th step, I wasn't really thinking about all those things. But over the years, I really gained an appreciation of sort of the profound implications of that stuff. And finally, on page 76, it says, the chief activator of our defects has been self-centered fear. Primarily fear that we would lose something we already possess or would fail to get something we demanded. Living upon a basis of unsatisfied demands, we are in a state of continual disturbance and frustration. Therefore, no peace was to be had unless we could find a means of reducing these demands. Which is pretty cool stuff. Bill, to me, was incredibly intuitively insightful and really hit on profound spiritual principles. And at the same time, as I read the big book in the 12 and 12, I get the sense that the solution is simply praying a lot more than makes sense to me. And so I started reading other stuff, which led me to the Buddhist teachings. And in the rooms, we often hear the line that, my God, don't do dishes, or you know, faith moves mountains, but bring a shovel. And I think, or my God, don't row. I think that fits in with my sense of a lot of the Buddhist teachings, which really speak to getting to know ourselves better. It speaks to becoming more self-aware. It speaks to putting in ongoing effort to be a different person than I was, so that it leaves me with the sense that prayer and meditation is essential, but it's not totally sufficient. And I think that's true with a lot of other aspects of the program. So going back to what my first Ithaca sponsor told me 27 or so years ago, you know, he said that the third step has two parts, faith and footwork. And one of the things that I like about the Buddhist teachings is it really gives me more tools with which to do the footwork, and more tools with which to come to understand you know, who it is that I either am, or if you really get into Buddhism, who I'm not, as you get down into it deeply. But it really helps me deal with what we work on with the steps, and really the moral and ethical aspects of me as an active alcoholic and drug addict, and me as a person who's trying to be a sober man and lead a positive life. So that leads me to think about the idea of emotional sobriety. And there's a whole lot of people, in my view, in 12-step programs that succeed in becoming abstinent from their drug or behavior of choice. You know, it could be sugar, could be booze, could be crack, could be video games, or online gambling, or compulsive sex, or shopping. I view them all as being very similar in that they're ways that, for me, they left me feeling comfortable in my own skin initially, and then they stopped working. And so I had to find something else that worked. And just quitting alcohol for me wasn't sufficient, because I did not get comfortable in my own skin. I did not become an emotionally sober man by stopping drinking. There's other things that I had to do and have to continue to do. And so that's sort of my the organizing thoughts that I had for the weekend is about, from a 12-step standpoint, emotional sobriety. And from the Buddhist perspective, it's about the ethical and moral principles that go along with what we're talking about a lot these days in the West, which is mindfulness. I view mindfulness as something that comes from becoming diligent about the 11th step, or becoming diligent about the last 3 of the Eightfold Path. So what I'm thinking that we want to talk about is emotional sobriety, and sort of the earlier aspects of Buddhist teachings, which is developing the ethical and moral underpinnings that can help a person lead to eventually what's called enlightenment or nirvana. And I think the term I like the best is becoming awake. I heard my wife, Terry, next to the cameras, was my bride, and we went to a retreat this year with Jack Cornfield, and one of the things that he mentioned was he thought that enlightenment was a poor translation of the term from Pali, and that being awakened was more accurate. And the term Buddha, the Buddha simply means the awakened one. And I like that, because when I was drinking, I was not awake. I did not. The story I told myself about my life was not terribly accurate, and I didn't realize it. And since I've been coming around AA and doing the other things that I do to try and grow up, you know, I think I have to a large degree awakened, not to the degree that I think is ultimately attainable for some people. I might already be as far as I'm going to get, but I'm okay with that for right now. So through the course of the weekend, I would like people to feel free to raise their hand, ask questions, or interject. And if anybody wants to do that before we go to the next piece that I'm thinking of, now would be a good time to do it. Okay. So what I would like to do now is I would like to break up into small groups of, let's say, 4 people each. And I would like you to, in your group, have at least 2 people you don't know. And I would like you to take 10 minutes or so and go, so it's about, what's that, 2.5 minutes each? To talk about your concept of emotional sobriety. So I'm going to give you 15 minutes to do it. And I'll ring a bell or something at the end of 15 minutes. So 4 people, at least 2 people you don't know, and if it's too stressful, you can just stay where you are. Okay?